Because we need to start the speech. So let's kick off with the self-appointed minister for everything, David Seymour.
Madam Speaker, I present a legislative statement on the Education and Training Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Honourable David Seymour.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Education and Training Amendment Bill be now read a third time. Madam Speaker, I want to thank all of the people who have contributed to this legislation. I want to thank my colleague, the Honourable Erica Stanford, Minister of Education, and I see Katie Nimmin, Chair of the Education Workforce Select Committee, along with other members of that committee who shepherded the bill through the committee stage faster than usual, but with no less care and attention, and made valuable improvements to this legislation. It has been a very good example of what Parliament can do when people are committed to a cause. And I don't believe that there's any greater cause for this country's long-term future than the simple equation of how much knowledge is transferred from one generation to the next. Because a knowledgeable and educated population can overcome whatever challenges we may face with the economy or foreign affairs or climate change or public health. An educated population will be able to solve those problems, but an uneducated population that hasn't learnt the best knowledge from generations before them will be able to squander even great prosperity that this country currently has. That's why it matters so much, and that's why I think we saw so much commitment from those people involved in this legislation, and perhaps more than any for the enormous detail that has been meticulously put together. I thank the employees at the Ministry for Education, the policy team, particularly Andy and Jen and all those who support them. They have done an absolutely outstanding job. And what is this cause in this bill? Well, this bill has three parts, two of them relatively simple and one of them more complex, and I would argue ultimately more important. The first is that we are removing the network management requirement for early childhood education centres. And this comes from many complaints from early childhood educators that it is absolutely insane that in order to open up a business that people in your community want, you have to go and ask the government if the people in your community want it as much as you know they want it, because you're risking your money to do it. And yet somehow the people at the government are supposed to have a better idea than you do. And members on the other side, we're going to have a bit of a history lesson later in the speech, so don't worry, that's coming. But actually, there's a country called Russia where they tried this approach to economic management for about 70 years. It didn't work. Even they've abandoned it. It's only the Labour Party and the Greens that persist with trying to centrally plan economies with these kinds of decisions. So now, you don't have to do network management. If you want to expand or open a new early childhood education centre, then you can just do it. But the real judge is the parents. And you know what the parents say to me? When I go and visit ECEs and I ask the parents, they say, I want my child to be happy, I want them to be safe, I want them to be growing. And I think parents of New Zealand are better. And the opposition's asking, is that what the parents say? Yes. And if the member would like to visit some of these centres or, venture out of academia or out of this house, he might find that is what the parents say. And actually, I think the parents are better to judge it than the government. And the second thing we're doing is we're updating the attendance records. It's interesting, Madam Speaker, the attendance records actually are set under 1951 regulation, which was made under 1914 legislation. So you could almost argue, not quite, but almost argue, that our attendance regulations predate World War I. And this is a government of the future. So we are going to update the way that attendance regulations are made, and every day from next year, every school student management system will be pushing rich data about student attendance into the Education Department's or Ministry of Education's data warehouse, so we can understand who's not attending, and we can start to dig into why, and we can start to work out if the things the government and schools are doing to improve attendance, and parents for that matter, are working, so that we can do more of the things that work and less of the things that don't. It sounds simple. To most New Zealanders, to most people in business or running a farm or their household, it is simple. It's how you do business every day, and it's actually how this government is going to start getting stuck into the business of getting children back to school. But, Madam Speaker, coming to charter schools, we're introducing the simple idea that not every insight into how to engage children in learning and pass that knowledge from one generation to the next can be found in the Ministry of Education or Wellington or even amongst the wise members of Parliament in this House. Sometimes the best knowledge exists out in the community. Sometimes most times the Maori Party say, and I actually for once think Te Pāti Maori are right. You'll notice when I talked about communist adherence, I didn't talk about Labour I talked about Labour and the Greens, not the free market Te Pāti Maori, for whom I have great hope if they could just get over themselves. I think they could contribute a lot to this House and life in New Zealand. And it's not surprising because the iwi Leaders Forum have written to me in strong support of charter schools because they know that communities know more about how to engage their children than the people in Wellington most of the time. And so we're going to invite people in communities to start up schools, and they're going to get the money the state would have spent on the same child at a state school is going to go to the school they choose to go to if, and this is important, high standards are met, if high standards of attendance are contracted in, if high standards of achievement are contracted in, if they show that they're using their money wisely with financial probity, then they will continue to get their money and they will be able to use that money for the best effect to get those children at school engaged, achieving and learning so that they can actually learn skills that turn into qualifications, that turn into jobs, that turn into careers, that turn into a sense of achievement and feeling good about yourself. That's why we're doing it, Madam Speaker. And I heard last night from the Labour Party that they would like to shut these schools down. Now, their bark twists in their bite. They didn't do it last time. All the schools carried on. But with one change, that they don't want them to operate without union contracts. You see, that's the thing about these charter schools, is that teachers get paid like most New Zealanders on individual employment agreements. And if they're good, they can get paid more. And if they're not good, they can get fired. And here's why that matters, Madam Speaker. We run education for the children. You see, the thing is, I was looking at some statistics the other day. We spend $20 billion a year on education. 60,000 kids are born in this country every year. If you do the maths, it can be challenging on the other side, but that is $330,000 per citizen, lifetime education spending. And yet, what do we get for that? I look at the UE, the University Entrance Achievement, and for the most prosperous, wealthy and advantaged students, 82% get UE. But for the most disadvantaged students, 30% get UE. Now, I said there was a lecture coming. There's an old book called The God That Failed. And The God That Fails is the stories of former adherents of the Communist Party who realised it didn't work and left. And they wrote this book, and it's a wonderful set of essays. Now, I would put it to the Labour Party that when you spend $330,000 per citizen, and the most disadvantaged students are nearly 3 times less likely to get university entrance than the most advantaged students, your God has failed. Sorry, Labour, your God has failed. Because you spent all the money, but the wealthy kids from the good backgrounds are still doing pretty good, and the poor kids you were supposed to help are still failing. And that's why I'm proud to be here in this government and standing as an ACT MP, setting up schools that allow people to choose their own destiny. Tino rangatiratanga, we might call it. The ability for people to use their knowledge in their society and their community, to take the funding that the government would have funded and use it, you would have provided for those children, and use it for better effect, to make sure that children have that opportunity to feel good about themselves, to learn, to engage, to have it done their way, not to feel unsafe or bullied, but to actually go along and build their own future, not only for themselves, each in their own way, but for the future of this great country of ours. That is what this policy of charter schools really means for the future of our country. And I challenge the opposition. Where are your ideas other than more money for our union mates? Not the teachers, but for the unions, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Charter schools don't have to use the unions' contracts. That is what we are here to end, to give freedom and choice to New Zealanders to make their own future. And sorry, Labour, your God's failed.
Madam Speaker.
So he's trying to make it out that I can go and ring up my 96-year-old grandmother, ask how to do attendant rates. Beware, I could ask about staff attendance absentee rates, as well as student attendance absentee rates, because that was Grandma's job as associate principal of Porirua College, was dealing with staff absentees. I could sit down there, go and set up a play group in the middle of my lounge, call it Daddy Daycare, play the movie from Daddy Daycare of Eddie Murphy back all those years ago when I would have been, 10 or 11 when it came out? It's easy to sit there. Do I need to be criminally checked to sit there and work with these preschools? And am I allowed to have my employees that I employ to be qualified and on a CEA? And will teacher-only days actually be in those CEA contracts as they are for secondary school teachers from the 2019 agreement? Sorry, just my little quick rant before we get to the panel.
Yeah, let's get on with this. What the fuck has the Soviet Union got to do with any of this? I mean, the Soviet Union did not collapse due to a lack of charter schools. Can we be fucking clear about that?
It was nothing to do with education. I think it was to do with, what was
military
it called?
expansion.
Yeah, fascism. I don't know. Something.
Okay, to David Seymour's point, there is a wonderful video game series called BioShock, which serves as a critique on Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy, the idea that one ought to follow the self-interest and profit of their own abilities and ambitions while being virtually uninhibited by others, resulting in conflict, chauvinism, and ultimately the subjugation of individuals by those who have the most amount of capital. There's my little rant for him. Go play BioShock, ladies and gentlemen.
I was going to say Nick is the person who's a qualified teacher in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know how to approach David Seymour, because the problem is you could just laugh at him, and but you got to take him seriously, because he is. I mean, this is like privatization, full on. I mean, he's just ripping our public education system to shreds. And it's bloody scary, to be honest, what he's up to. He's going after our early childhood sector. I mean, our early childhood sector at the moment is completely on the road to privatization right now. One of the biggest families that owns early childhood sector is also one of the biggest donors to the ACT Party, the White family, and they are just fully going full steam to privatize the rest of the early childhood sector. They were also one of the largest donors to the ACT Party in the previous election. So this is like Christmas for that particular family. I mean, in terms of charter schools, this is like a massive grab of state-funded money going from where it should be going, which is into our public schools, out into private capital, and that's just
private for-driven profits that clearly want public money because they can't make it in the actual true world of free market capitalism with private money.
I mean, this is just something that we should just be strongly resisting, because it doesn't work. We just know it doesn't work. It didn't work last time. Why should it work this time? And it's going to degrade our public school system, because ultimately it's going to be sucking money out of our public school system and sending it out into the private market and to an experiment that just doesn't work. So I cannot understand why we're doing this, other than to line the pockets of big business, corporate interests, wealthy donors of political parties. This is outrageous. We're seeing this right across education, healthcare. It's just all over the place. And this is our kids we're dealing with here. So this is crazy.
So, Frosty, as someone that David Seymour says you should not have a right to have a say in anything until you turn 18, we'll give you a right to say on the show.
I think there is. I can see why you got me on now, because I think I'm going to be the only one here who comes to defend charter schools to some extent. But I think
I didn't know you had anything to do with charter schools.
David Seymour, I think there's an argument to be made for charter schools, but David Seymour presents it in the worst possible way imaginable. Right? I think there is an argument that communities need more say over how they get their education, because from what we have seen, the state system isn't helping, right? It isn't improving outcomes. It isn't preparing children for the future. And we're seeing that with the attendance rates. I think, what was it? I've got a stat here that in 2023, just 47% of students met the minimum regular attendance target of 90%, or 9 days out of 10. That is abysmal. And I think it goes to show that maybe there is an alternative out there, and whether charter schools is that, I think the results you'd find are varied. I think there's more studies done overseas in America and in the UK and in Canada, because it's been there, it's more established over there. New Zealand really only had charter schools for a short period of time, and we saw very mixed results. I think one of the better ones was the Vanguard Military School. I think, and then there was one that had to be bailed out by the government because it was, not teaching.
Straight out mismanaged.
Yeah, it's completely mismanaged.
Yep.
So I think it's with charter schools. I don't think you can do a blanket yes or no. Is it good or is it bad? I think it's a case by case basis, and you have to really take this really carefully, because there is a risk there where you will be leading into more privately educated.
At which point did the attendance rates, like if we break it into, say, primary, intermediate, secondary school, where was the drop in attendance rate? Where did it go off the rails? Like, was it at a primary school level, at a intermediate level, or at a secondary school level?
I do.
Does it have a breakdown on there?
I don't have that stat on me currently. All I do have is the last year's statistics and term 2 of this year's stats, which is a 53.2%. We've improved by about 6% over the course of a year, but even then, that's terrible, and the state system isn't helping. I think there is an argument to be made that maybe communities should get more say over the way the community helps. In charter schools, we've seen in some examples have succeeded, and in certain examples it hasn't either. It's very, very mixed, and I think what David Seymour's going is charter schools is the answer, the only answer, which is completely incorrect. But what a lot of other people are going is that charter schools are completely bad and will completely destroy our education system, which I also think is wrong, because there are examples of charter schools succeeding and helping communities out in a way that is positive.
So just to ask everyone, what is everyone's thoughts on state integrated schools, where the schools receive the same amount of government funding for each student as the public schools, but they get the flexibility of a charter school? So, for example, your schools like Montessori's and Rudolf Stein.
Is that what David Seymour was talking about, where Labour essentially hadn't disestablished charter schools, but had turned them into more
state integrated schools, which means the state has more control, but can keep many of the foundations. Nick probably is better in
A state integrated school is effectively a private school. as opposed to a school that has a character school, which is what the schools were changed to when they became charter schools, and then they were changed to schools with distinct character, and that's what the charter schools in the last administration were invited to be changed over to.
So would that be, say, like a state integrated school could be classed as St Patrick's College in Wellington?
But yeah, I'm not sure about St Patrick's.
Yeah, because I know that's the weird one of like it's half in but half out. Whereas I know Scots College is completely private, and Romatai College is completely state. Yeah, as the free colleges in the east. Well, and you've got St Catherine's, but effectively St Catherine's is just a subsidiary of St Patrick's.